Picture a bobsled track running through a pine forest on the slope of a mountain above a city. The concrete walls of the track are still there, curving steeply through the trees, banked at angles that once sent sleds moving at over 100 kilometers an hour. But the surface is cracked, and the cracks are filled with moss. Graffiti covers almost every centimeter of the interior walls, names, faces, abstract shapes painted layer over the years by artists and visitors who found in this abandoned curve of concrete a kind of canvas. At the bottom of the slope, through the trees, you can see the city. Sarajevo, capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, once, briefly, the center of the winter sporting world. What happened to the venues of the 1984 Winter Olympics is unlike any other story in this series. It wasn't financial mismanagement. It wasn't a failure of post-games planning. It wasn't the gap between what a stadium costs and what it earns. It was a war. And the story of what that war did to a city that had, 8 years earlier, shown the world exactly what it was capable of is something you genuinely need to hear. When Sarajevo was awarded the 1984 Winter Olympic Games, it was one of the less expected decisions in the history of the International Olympic Committee. The city was the capital of the Socialist Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina, one of the 6 republics that made up the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. It had no particular history as a winter sports destination. Its mountain infrastructure was modest. Its name to most of the world in 1977 was associated with one thing: the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 and the chain of events that triggered the First World War. Sarajevo had other ideas about what its name should mean. The preparation for the 1984 Games was, by the standards of the time, a remarkable undertaking. A city of around 400,000 people built ski facilities on 2 mountains, Jaharina and Bielasnica, carved a bobsled and luge track into the slope of Mount Trebević, constructed an indoor ice sports hall in the city center, and modernized its broader urban infrastructure to accommodate an event that would bring athletes and visitors from across the world. The Games themselves, held across 16 days in February 1984, were by most accounts a genuine success. The Zetra Olympic Hall, a striking modern building that hosted the figure skating and ice hockey competitions, became an emblem of what Sarajevo had built. The ski competitions on Jaharina and Bielasnica attracted large and enthusiastic crowds. The atmosphere across the city was celebratory and warm. When the closing ceremony ended, IOC President Juan Antonio Samaranch declared them the best Winter Olympics ever organized. That assessment, whatever its merits, was made in good faith, and for several years afterward the venues continued to function. The ski resorts were used by local athletes and tourists. The Zetra Hall hosted concerts and sporting events. The bobsled track on Mount Trebević became a popular attraction for the city's residents, who used it in summer for recreation and tourism. The city had invested in its Olympic infrastructure, and for a while, that investment seemed to be paying off in the ordinary, unspectacular way that good infrastructure tends to pay off, through daily use year after year. Then the world Sarajevo had built began to come apart. In April 1992, following the dissolution of Yugoslavia, Bosnia and Herzegovina declared independence. Within days, the city was surrounded. The siege of Sarajevo, which would last for 1,425 days, making it the longest siege of a capital city in the history of modern warfare, had begun. What followed was an almost complete inversion of everything the 1984 Olympics had represented. The Zetra Olympic Hall, which had hosted Torval and Dean's gold medal ice dance performance just 8 years earlier, was burned during the siege. Its interior was gutted. In the desperate conditions of the siege, the building was used at various points as a makeshift shelter and eventually as a burial site, a function that stood in total contrast to the celebrations that had taken place within its walls in February 1984. The bobsled track on Mount Trebević, which had carried Olympic sleds at speeds that thrilled spectators below, was captured by Serbian forces and used as an artillery position. The same banked curves that had been engineered for precision and speed were turned into positions from which shells were fired into the city below. The track that had made Sarajevo briefly famous as a winter sports destination became, during the siege, one of the elevated positions from which Sarajevo was systematically destroyed. The ski resorts on Jaharina and Bjelašnica were occupied. The Olympic Village, built to house the athletes of 1984, became a residential district that sustained significant damage during the war years. The infrastructure that a city had spent years building for a global celebration was absorbed, distorted, and in many cases destroyed by a conflict that lasted nearly 4 years and killed an estimated 100,000 people across Bosnia and Herzegovina. The siege of Sarajevo ended in February 1996. The city that emerged from it was not the city that had hosted the Winter Olympics. An estimated 10,000 people had been killed within the city alone during the siege, an average of almost 7 people every day for nearly 4 years. Entire neighborhoods had been destroyed. The social fabric of a city that had been genuinely multi-ethnic and cosmopolitan, one of the things that had made its Olympic candidacy credible, had been torn apart in ways that took decades to begin to repair. The venues tell the story at a physical level. The Zetra Olympic Hall was rebuilt in the years after the war, a reconstruction that was partly supported by international donations, including from the International Olympic Committee. The rebuilt hall still stands and still functions as a sports and events venue. It is one of the few Olympic structures from 1984 that can be said to have a genuine, functioning present. The ski resorts on Jaharina and Bjelašnica also survived and were restored. Both mountains now operate as functioning ski destinations. Jaharina in particular has become a reasonably well-regarded resort by the standards of the region, attracting visitors from across Bosnia and the wider Balkans. The skiing infrastructure that was built for 1984 has, in this sense, found the long-term purpose that Olympic venues in other host cities have so often failed to find. The bobsled track on Mount Trebević is another matter entirely. In the decades since the war, the track has become something neither its builders nor its destroyers could have anticipated. A place of pilgrimage, in its way. Artists have painted its walls. Hikers climb through the forest to see it. Documentary filmmakers and photographers have recorded it in every season. The moss and graffiti visible beneath winter snow, the jungle of the Bosnian summer pressing in from both sides. There have been periodic proposals to restore it, to return it to use as a working bobsled facility. Some partial restoration work has been carried out. But the full track as it existed in 1984 has not functioned as an Olympic standard venue since before the war began. What the track on Trebević has become instead is a monument, not the kind that is officially designated or ceremonially maintained, but the kind that accumulates meaning through the gap between what a place was supposed to be and what it became. Every layer of graffiti is a kind of testimony. Every crack in the concrete is part of the record, and that's where Sarajevo stands apart from every other city in this series. Athens built venues it couldn't afford to maintain. Manaus built a stadium for a city that had no team to fill it. Brasilia built a football ground for a capital that had no football culture. These are failures of planning and foresight, real, costly, worth understanding. But they are, in the end, failures of a particular kind of optimism. The belief that building something grand enough will generate its own justification. Sarajevo built venues it used, and then a war came and took them. The gap between the 1984 games and what came after is not a gap that any amount of better planning could have closed. The city did what Olympic host cities are supposed to do. It invested, it built, it hosted the world. It held for 16 days in February 1984, a celebration of competition and internationalism that its president of the IOC called the best ever organized. 8 years later, it was under siege. The mountains above the city are still there. Jaharina still opens every winter. The Zetra Hall still hosts events. The bobsled track still winds through the forest on Trebević, covered in paint and surrounded by trees. For 16 days in 1984, the city was the center of the winter sporting world. What it became in the years that followed is a story about something much larger than the Olympics, about how quickly the world that exists in one decade can become unrecognizable in the next. The games lasted 16 days. The city that hosted them is still, slowly and imperfectly, finding its way back to itself.